For over 2,000 years, it has captivated kings and explorers, scientists and dreamers, a name that whispers of a golden age, of a magnificent civilization swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. Atlantis. Was it a philosophical allegory penned by a great thinker, or a genuine historical memory of a disaster so profound it echoed across millennia? This is the story of Atlantis, not as a simple myth, but as a tantalizing mystery that bridges the gap between fantasy and the fascinating discoveries of modern archaeology. We are going to journey back to the very source of the legend, then voyage to the corners of the globe to investigate the real-world locations that some believe could be the ghost of the lost continent. Our entire knowledge of Atlantis begins and ends with the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. Around 360 BC, in his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, Plato introduces Atlantis through a story told to the Athenian lawgiver Solon by an Egyptian priest. The priest describes a mighty empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This placed Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, facing a city that Plato held in high esteem, ancient Athens. According to the priest, Atlantis was a marvel of engineering and power. Its heart was a colossal capital city, built on a series of concentric rings of land and water. Canals bustled with ships, bridges connected the rings, and at the very center stood a magnificent temple to the god Poseidon, crafted from red, white, and black stone. The land was rich in resources, precious metals, exotic animals, and fertile soil that provided abundant food. The Atlanteans were a great and noble people, but over time, their divine nature became diluted with their human side. They grew arrogant, aggressive, and corrupt. They launched a war to conquer the entire Mediterranean. It was then that the gods decided to punish them. In a cataclysm of earthquakes and floods, the entire island was swallowed by the sea and vanished in one terrible day and night. This is the core of the myth. But here is the critical question that scholars have debated for centuries. Was Plato recording an actual historical event, or was Atlantis a literary device? Many argue that Atlantis was a powerful fable, a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris and the ideal state created to illustrate his philosophical points about how civilizations rise and fall. The fact that no other ancient Greek writer mentions Atlantis before Plato is a significant strike against its historical reality. Yet Plato himself insists the story is strange, but certainly true, having been passed down from Solon. This single assertion is what has fueled the fire of exploration for generations. To treat Atlantis as a potential historical event, we must first dissect Plato's account like a detective examining a witness statement. What details are plausible? What could be exaggeration or misinterpretation? The timeline is the first major hurdle. Plato dates the fall of Atlantis to 9,000 years before Solon's time, which would place it around 9,600 BC. This is deep in the Stone Age, a time when, according to mainstream archaeology, no complex bronze-working civilization capable of transoceanic warfare existed anywhere on Earth. Then, there are the fantastical elements: the god Poseidon, fathering the royal line, the sheer size of the Atlantean army and navy, the description of the architecture. These sound like the embellishments of myth. However, nestled within the story are remarkably specific and realistic details. The concentric ring city, for example, is an unusual and precise architectural feature. The description of the red, white, and black stone matches known building materials in the ancient world. The concept of a civilization being destroyed by a natural disaster is, tragically, not a myth at all, but a recurring theme in human history. This mixture of the fantastical and the plausible is what makes Atlantis so endlessly debatable. Perhaps Plato was basing his story on a real, but much smaller and more recent catastrophe, a memory that became exaggerated over thousands of years of oral tradition. If so, where should we look? If we compress Plato's timeline from 9,000 to 3,000 years ago, our search leads us to a compelling and scientifically verified candidate: the Minoan civilization and the volcanic island of Santorini. In the Bronze Age, the Minoans, centered on Crete, were the dominant naval power in the Mediterranean. They were not Greek, but a sophisticated, peaceful, and artistic people with sprawling palace complexes like Knossos, which featured advanced plumbing and vibrant frescoes. They were a true thalassocracy, a sea empire, just like the Atlanteans. Just north of Crete lies Santorini, known in ancient times as Thera. Around 1600 BC, Thera was not a crescent-shaped island as it is today, but a single, large volcanic island with a central peak. Almost overnight, the great Minoan civilization was crippled, leaving it vulnerable to conquest by the less sophisticated Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. A powerful sea empire destroyed in a day and night by a geological catastrophe. The parallels are striking. Furthermore, archaeological excavations at Akrotiri, a Minoan town on Santorini, preserved in ash like a Bronze Age Pompeii, reveal a highly advanced society with multi-story buildings, elaborate frescoes, and sophisticated drainage systems. Could the story of Atlantis be a distorted memory of the fall of the Minoans, a tale that reached Egypt and was later passed to Solon and then Plato? For many scientists, this is the most plausible explanation. What if we take Plato at his word regarding the location? What if we look beyond the Strait of Gibraltar? This leads us to one of the most intriguing modern theories, that the remains of Atlantis are not under the sea, but in the middle of the Sahara Desert in Mauritania. The location is the Richat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. From space, it is a mesmerizing bullseye, a series of concentric rings stretching nearly 50 kilometers across. To some, these rings are a near-perfect match for Plato's description of the concentric rings of the Atlantean capital. However, the archaeological evidence for a major Bronze Age city at the site is, as of now, virtually non-existent. While there are some scattered stone artifacts, there are no grand ruins of temples or palaces that one would expect from the capital of a continent-spanning empire. Geologists maintain that the Richat structure is a perfectly natural geological phenomenon, a symmetrical anticline formed by erosion. Yet, the visual similarity is so uncanny that it continues to capture the imagination, suggesting that perhaps the truth is still buried beneath the desert sands, waiting to be discovered. Another theory that respects Plato's geographical clue places Atlantis much closer to the Pillars of Hercules in the southwestern region of Spain. Here, near the city of Cadiz, lies the Doñana National Park, a vast area of marshes and wetlands. Ancient sources speak of a wealthy, mysterious kingdom called Tartessos that existed in this region. Tartessos was famous to the Phoenicians and Greeks for its immense mineral wealth, particularly silver, which aligns with Plato's description of Atlantis being rich in precious metals. According to this hypothesis, Tartessos was a sophisticated maritime trading power that vanished around the 6th century BC. The cause of its disappearance is unknown, but a catastrophic event, like a tsunami or earthquake, possibly triggered by a seismic event in the Atlantic, could have destroyed its coastal settlements. Satellite surveys and ground-penetrating radar have suggested the possibility of large, circular structures buried beneath the marshes, and some archaeological finds in the area point to a previously unknown ancient culture. So, where does this leave us? Was Atlantis a philosophical myth, the ghost of the Minoans, a city in the desert, or a kingdom in the Spanish marshes? The truth is, we may never know for certain. And perhaps that is the very point. The power of Atlantis is not in its potential discovery, but in what it represents. It is a blank canvas upon which we project our fascination with the past, our fear of cataclysm, and our longing for a golden age. Every time archaeologists uncover a new sunken city or a civilization laid low by a natural disaster, the ghost of Atlantis stirs. It reminds us of the fragility of human achievement in the face of nature's immense power. The story of an advanced society brought down by its own arrogance is a timeless warning, as relevant today as it was in Plato's time. Atlantis is more than a place. It is an idea. It is the idea that history is deeper than we know, that great cultures have risen and fallen, leaving only whispers behind, and that somewhere, beneath the waves or the desert sands, a secret of our past awaits. The search for Atlantis, in a way, is a search for ourselves, for our origins, our potential, and our vulnerabilities. And as long as the ocean waves crash and the desert winds blow, the legend will live on.